Hello everyone, my name is Jami Ahmad and I welcome you to my discussion series. Today we'll be looking at carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are also called saccharides and they are made up of three elemental composition. You have carbon in there, you have hydrogen, and you have oxygen. Those whose structure are simple are usually referred to as sugars. Usually the monosaccharide fall into this category. Those with complex chemical structure are called polysaccharides, such as starch and cellulose. We'll look at those class of carbohydrates subsequently. So carbohydrates have various functions. One of them is that they're the major source of energy for the body. The glucose that are derived from the meal and the food that we eat provide a source of energy in terms of metabolism. From glycolysis, you have pyruvate, which can be used in Krebs cycle to form ATP. And also in plants, the starch in plants is a great source of energy for the plants. Also, they are the building blocks of polysaccharides. So the polysaccharide that I talked about earlier, which are large polymers containing hundreds or even thousands of monomeric units, are made up of simple sugars. Additionally, they are also found in other extra carbohydrate compounds such as DNA. For example, in both DNA and RNA, which are nucleic acids, you have ribose, which is a pentose. You have, which is an example of a simple sugar. You have it in here, and it is very, very instrumental for the function of DNA and RNA. You also have carbohydrates in glycolipids. You have them in glycoproteins. They perform important structural function in these macromolecules. Also, ATP also contains ribose, which is a pentose sugar, and this ribose perform important structural function in ATP. So carbohydrates are divided into different groups based on their complexity. So those that have simple structure are referred to as monosaccharides. So the monosaccharides are commonly called sugars. Okay, they are commonly called sugars. So, and like I mentioned previously, they are the simplest carbohydrates. They are the simplest carbohydrates, and they are the building blocks of major polymeric compounds that are derived from these simple units. So generally, monosaccharides have this general molecular formula CH2ON, which is common to all carbohydrates, and N, the N in here, it often begin from 3, 5, or 6. So, and that gives us another subcategory from monosaccharide. So when a sugar unit has 3 carbons, you call that a triose. So you have just 3 carbon in there, so that makes it triose. If the number of carbon is 4, you can have tetrose, that's 4 carbon. You can have pentose, that's 5. You can have hexose, you can have, depending on the number of carbon. However, the most important monosaccharide, of course, is the glucose, and we'll look deeply at the structure in the course of this discussion. So another thing that I wanted to mention here is that there is something that is called structural isomerism. So it's possible that you have two sugars that have the same molecular formula but different structural arrangements. Okay, they will have the same molecular formula but different structural arrangements. So let's take this for example. The highlighted part here is the molecular formula for glucose. It's also the molecular formula for galactose. Okay, so these are two different monosaccharides, but they have the same molecular formula. Okay, when you look deeply at their structure, you understand that they have different structural formula, so that makes them structural isomers. There are other forms of isomerism. You can have enantiomers, you know, mirror images, differences. You have other kinds. So, but majorly the one I want to mention here are the structural isomers, which I've used glucose and galactose as an example. So I should also make clarification on the term aldose and ketose. So generally monosaccharide can be an aldose sugar or a ketose sugar. So those ones that have the aldehyde functional group, they are referred to as the aldose, and those that have the ketone functional group are called the ketose sugar. So for instance, an example of aldehyde sugar, which is an aldose, is glucose, galactose, and the rest of them. We'll understand this better when we start looking at the structure of these sugars. Ketose, on the other hand, has a ketone group. That is, you don't have this oxygen that you have on aldehyde in here, so that makes them keto sugar. You have various examples. The popular among them is fructose. Fructose is a ketose sugar. We'll understand this better when we look at their structure. This also might be useful to know that a common test to detect the presence of monosaccharide is this Benedict test. So the Benedict reagent is a complex solution of copper. So you have copper in this reagent. So what happens is, when a solution contains a reducing agent, this copper 2 ion is reduced to Cu+. Okay, so that confirms the presence of a reducing agent. This test will be positive for any compound that has a reducing region in part of the structure. So majorly for sugars or carbohydrates that we are talking about today, they have reducing, when you look at their structure, they are reducing sugar because the functional group that defines them, which I've talked about here, the aldehyde group and the ketone group, makes them to serve as a reducing agent, which is one of the ways to detect their presence in solution.